We're going to talk a little bit about account takeover, which is the primary type of fraud that we see affecting our brokerage customers. Right? This is when a criminal impersonates a legitimate customer to gain control of an account and eventually transfer money out of that account. There's basically three ways to empty a brokerage account. There's the physical, where you go in with a gun. There's the online method, which I think we're all pretty familiar with. And what we're seeing now is that trend is moving more towards the phone. The phone channel has been left totally unguarded. Working with our brokerage customers, we performed a study based on the data that we've gathered up with those customers in 2014 and compared it to what we saw in 2015. In 2014, about 1 in every 2,900 calls was fraud. This has increased by 30%. In each of those calls, on average, brokerages lose about 57 cents per call that comes inbound into their environment. What we're seeing is an average of about $15 million of fraud exposure. Across our customer base, brokerages have the highest fraud exposure. What we're finding is that the reason for that is oftentimes brokerages have the highest account value. With that, we see the lowest occurrence of fraud across those customers, but with the highest fraud exposure, we see the highest level of losses. It often sounds like a fraudster calls up a brokerage, passes a few knowledge-based authentication questions, and says, "Give me all the money." And the fact is that this just isn't really the way that it works. On average, it takes a fraudster about 5 calls to accomplish their attack. They will spread these calls over several different customer support representatives. They'll do just a little bit of work each time. In the end, they'll ultimately be able to transfer the money out of the account. This creates a scenario that's often very difficult for our customers to handle with their existing technologies and existing processes, because effectively what you have to do is to get 5 different customer support representatives to all collaborate and understand that they were dealing with the same person and the same instance of fraud. It's a very hard thing to do when you think about the call volumes that our customers are dealing with. So the first call, we call it targeting. This is often just some reconnaissance. They might just dial into the IVR or interactive voice response and start trying to find some PIN numbers, or they oftentimes will just check for the account balance to see if that's an account that they even want to target. In step 2, they might start with a little bit more reconnaissance. This is where they'll actually start talking to a customer support representative, begin the social engineering process. In step 3, we often see fraudsters start changing information about the account. They'll change the physical address, they'll change the email address or the phone number, they'll often reset the password. They just want to make sure that it's not the real victim, in any physical mail that gets sent would not notify them. A very common technique that we see as well is when a fraudster will call in pretending to be their victim and claim that they're going to travel. This oftentimes reduces the fraud triggers that may be in place in other back-end systems. And then finally, at the very end is when you might see the money transfer. As you can tell, this is a pretty long, drawn-out process. This might occur over several days or even weeks for these various 5 steps to occur. And all along, if the financial institution or brokerage had the solutions in place to be able to tie all these things together and determine that these 5 calls actually all represent one fraudulent transaction, they have an opportunity to detect this before the money transfer occurs. And so that's really where the PinDrop technology comes into place. We have a technology that we refer to as phone printing. What this allows us to do is to create a unique fingerprint of every phone call that comes into a customer's environment. This allows us to detect repeat fraud. However, you want to detect more than just repeat fraud. And so part of what we can extract out of our phone print is the type of service and where in the world the phone is calling from. And so I always use the anecdote. If someone calls up in and says, "Hey, I'm John Smith from Houston, Texas," our technology allows you to say, "Well, John Smith from Houston, Texas, why is your phone call coming from Eastern Europe?" Or, "While your phone number says that it's a cell phone, why does it actually appear to us as being VoIP service?"
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.